Hello everyone. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment telling us where you're from and what time it is. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories like this. Now, let the shadows take over. When I first moved into the apartment, I thought I'd finally done it. Finally had a place that was just mine. I had lived with roommates my whole adult life, and I was done with it. Done with other people's dirty dishes, other people's noise, and other people's problems. I just wanted 6 months of peace and quiet. That's all I wanted. The building wasn't very nice to look at. 3 floors, tan-colored walls faded from the Colorado sun. Metal railings that were rusty and chipped. The building was shaped like a big U around a parking lot that could barely fit all the cars that lived there. Inside, the hallway smelled a little like dust and overcooked vegetables from someone's apartment. The laundry room was in the basement, and the blinking lights down there made it look like something from an old scary movie. Still, it was cheap and it was mine. My place was apartment 6A on the 2nd floor, right across from 6B. I met the man in 6B on my 2nd day. I was carrying a box of dishes up the narrow stairs when I saw him coming down from the 3rd floor. He stopped halfway, which made me stop too. He was older, somewhere between 50 and 60 years old, with pale skin that looked waxy and thin hair combed to the side that didn't really hide his bald spots. His glasses were so thick they made his eyes look really big. We just stood there for a second before I said, "Hey, how's it going?" He tilted his head a little, not blinking. "I've been watching you move in." It wasn't friendly. It wasn't curious. It sounded like he was just telling me a fact, like he was saying it had rained earlier. I gave a nervous laugh. "Yeah, I'm almost done." I stepped sideways to get past him, but he didn't move right away. Only after waiting a bit did he move just enough for me to squeeze by, still watching me as I went past. I told myself he was probably just awkward around people. Lots of people are. That first week, I started seeing him a lot more. Every time I left for work or came home, he was out in the hall. He'd be leaning against the railing, standing in his doorway, or sitting on the stairs, always watching, almost never speaking. Once I came back from buying groceries and found him sitting on the top step with his elbows on his knees, staring at my door. "Evening," I said, carrying my bags. He just stared at me until I unlocked my door and went inside. The first really creepy thing happened about a week later. It was around midnight when I came home from my diner shift. The hallway was dark. One of the lights on the ceiling had burned out and the other one was blinking on and off. When I got to my floor, I noticed his door was open just a few inches. The inside of his apartment was completely dark, but I could see him standing there, perfectly still, facing me. "Have a good night," I said quietly, unlocking my door. He didn't answer. I told myself it was just weird neighbor behavior. Nothing more. Then 2 weeks after moving in, it started. It was around 2 o'clock in the morning. I was lying in bed looking at my phone when I heard 3 slow taps on my bedroom wall. My bed was against the wall we shared. I froze and listened. 30 seconds later, tap, tap, tap. I got curious. I knocked once. There was a pause, then 3 taps back, perfectly spaced. It happened again the next night and the night after that. Sometimes it was tapping, sometimes it was faint scratching like fingernails dragging slowly over the wall. Always between 1 o'clock and 3 a.m. The first time I heard whispering, I knew this wasn't innocent. It was a Tuesday. I had just started to fall asleep when I heard a low man's voice through the wall. It was too muffled to understand every word. But I heard, "She's sleeping now. Just wait." I didn't move, didn't breathe. Every muscle in my body went tight. The next morning, I knocked on his door. No answer, but I thought I saw something move through the blinds. Then the objects started appearing. First, a single marble placed right in the center of my doormat. A few days later, a burned-down candle. The next week, a Polaroid photo of the building taken from the parking lot. No note, no explanation. I didn't even own a Polaroid camera. In early December, I stayed at a friend's place overnight. When I came home the next morning, my doormat was gone. In its place was a thick rubber mat that said, "I've been expecting you." Inside, everything looked normal, until I noticed my bedroom window latch was flipped open. I never open that window and I never leave it unlocked. That's when I called the police. 2 officers came, heard my story, and went to talk to him. I stood in my doorway listening to the muffled voices. After a few minutes, they came back. Dennis, that's what his mailbox said. Said he hadn't been home in days and knew nothing about the mat or the window. Without proof of a break-in, they couldn't do anything. I bought extra locks, a door bar, and a small security camera for my living room. Things went quiet for a couple of weeks. I almost convinced myself it was over. Then I saw him at the grocery store. I was in the cereal aisle when I noticed him at the far end, peeking around the corner. When I looked up, he didn't hide. He just stared. I grabbed what I needed, paid, and went to my car. He was leaning against the shopping cart area. "Cold out," he said as I passed. "Yep," I said quietly, unlocking my car. The next morning, there was another Polaroid outside my door. This one showed me in the grocery store parking lot walking to my car. A few days later, I was doing laundry in the basement when the lights blinked and went out for several seconds. When they came back on, Dennis was standing in the doorway. "You should lock your door upstairs," he said flatly. "I always do," I lied. He smiled. "Not always." Then he walked away. By February, I was leaving my TV on all night. One Thursday, I came home from work, tossed my keys on the coffee table, and froze. Sitting in the center was a Polaroid of me asleep in my bed. I went straight to the camera video. At 9:12 a.m., my front door opened. Dennis stepped inside like he'd done it 100 times. He walked into my bedroom, stood over me for nearly 5 minutes, then backed out. Before leaving, he placed the photo on the table. I called 911. The cops came, looked at the video, and arrested him that night. They found dozens of Polaroids in his apartment. Me cooking, me brushing my teeth, me in the shower through the steam. He had a key from the person who lived there before me, a woman who had left early after complaining many times. He was charged with breaking in and stalking. I moved out within the week, and even now in a different city, I wake up certain someone's standing in the dark watching me breathe. I had just moved to Asheville, North Carolina in late September. I was trying to start fresh after a messy breakup and a job that made me feel like a ghost in my own life. I found a small 1-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, the kind of place that looked better in the pictures online than in real life. The carpet was worn down, the paint was chipped, and the hallway smelled a little like mildew, no matter how often the landlord promised he had fixed it. But it was cheap, quiet, and close to my new job at a bookstore. The first few weeks were normal. I worked, I came home, I cooked simple dinners, and I read until I fell asleep. I didn't know any of my neighbors except for the guy right across from me, a man in his mid-30s named Doug, who wore old baseball caps and always smelled a little like cigarettes. We'd nodded at each other in the hallway but never really talked much. The building was small, only 8 apartments total, and most of the people who lived there kept to themselves. That first Friday in October, I came home from work around 9:30 p.m. with arms full of groceries. My keys were in my teeth while I tried to unlock the door, and that's when I noticed something strange. My apartment door was open, just a little, just enough that it wasn't locked. I froze. I knew I had locked it that morning, I pushed it open and stood in the doorway for a long time, listening. The place looked normal at first. My books were still on the shelf. The TV was there, the kitchen light was on and humming quietly. But there was something different in the air, like the smell of someone else's cologne, faintly hanging around. I put the groceries on the counter, grabbed the heaviest thing I could reach, a cast iron pan, and moved slowly through each room. Nothing. No one hiding in the closet. No signs that someone broke in. Nothing missing. I told myself maybe I had rushed out that morning and just forgot to lock it. Still, I made sure to double lock it before going to bed that night. Around 2 a.m., I woke to a soft creak in the living room. At first, I thought it was the building settling, but then I heard the lightest shuffle of footsteps. My throat got tight. I sat up, heart pounding, and tried hard to hear. Silence. Then almost too quiet to hear, I heard breathing. Slow, steady, not my own. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, but before I could even call, I heard the sound of my front door clicking shut. Whoever was inside had just left. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I checked the door and found the lock perfectly fine. No scratches, no damage, no sign that someone broke it. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? I think someone came into my apartment, but I can't prove it. And nothing was stolen. They'd probably just tell me to change the locks, which I did right away. I went to the hardware store, got a new deadbolt, and put it in myself. For about a week, nothing happened. I convinced myself I had imagined it. Maybe a dream mixed with reality in the middle of the night. Until one evening, I came home to find a small, neatly folded piece of paper slid under my door. It was blank, completely blank. I picked it up, flipped it over, even held it up to the light to see if something had been written and erased. Nothing, but the paper was cold to the touch, like it had just come from outside in the autumn air. That night, I woke again around 2 a.m. The apartment was quiet. No creaks, no footsteps, but something felt wrong. My bedroom door, which I always close before bed, was open a little. I could see the faint glow from the street light outside coming through the gap. I told myself not to get up, not to give whoever it was the reaction they wanted. But my heart was pounding in my throat, and every nerve in my body was screaming to move. I slid out of bed as quietly as I could, picked up the pan again, and moved toward the door. As I stepped into the hallway, my bare foot landed on something smooth. I bent down, heart pounding, and found another piece of paper. This one wasn't blank. It had 3 words written in neat block letters. I like watching. I didn't sleep at all after that. I sat on the couch with every light in the apartment on, pan in my lap, and my phone ready to call 911, but no one came in. The next morning, I went straight to the landlord. I told him someone was getting into my apartment. He sighed like I was being dramatic and said it was impossible. Locks are fine. No master key except mine, and I haven't been in your place, he said. When I asked if any people who lived there before had complained, he shrugged and said something about people hearing things in old buildings. I left feeling more worried than before. 2 nights later, I was in bed when I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. The click of my front door unlocking. Not forced, not kicked, just unlocking. I grabbed my phone, whispered to 911 that someone was in my apartment, and the person on the phone told me to stay quiet and stay on the line. My bedroom door creaked open slowly. I could see a figure in the dark, tall, thin, wearing a hooded sweatshirt. He didn't say a word. He just stood there. I tried to scream, but my voice got stuck in my throat. The person on the phone kept asking if I was safe, and I couldn't even answer. The man took one slow step toward me. That made something snap inside me. I grabbed the pan from beside my bed and swung as hard as I could. He ducked back and I ran past him, sprinting out into the hallway. I ran straight to Doug's apartment and banged on the door until he opened it, looking tired and confused. He pulled me inside just as the man stepped out of my apartment into the hall. Doug shouted at him, but the guy just turned and walked down the hallway toward the stairs. No rush, no fear, just casual, like he'd finished what he came to do. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. They searched the building but found nothing. No forced entry, no signs of him in my apartment, except for one thing. Another piece of paper on my pillow. This one had 5 words. Next time you won't run. I didn't stay long enough to find out if he meant it. I moved out the next day. But sometimes when I'm alone at night in my new place, I still think about the way he stood there in the dark, patient, quiet, like he'd been in my apartment 100 times before. And worst of all, he never knocked. I'd been in my apartment for a little over a year when the first weird thing happened. It was a Tuesday night in mid-November, one of those cold New England evenings where the wind whistles through the gaps in the old window frames. My building was old. Creaky floors, pipes that banged like someone was knocking from inside the walls, and neighbors you could hear sneezing 2 doors down. So at first, the sound didn't bother me. It was quiet, almost like a cat scratching somewhere inside the wall behind my bed. I didn't have pets, so I figured maybe a squirrel or something got into the space above the ceiling. I made a note in my head to call the landlord in the morning and went back to looking at my phone. But the scratching didn't stop. It got slower, like fingernails dragging instead of claws. And then I heard breathing. I sat there frozen, my phone still in my hand. It was quiet, like someone trying not to be heard, just on the other side of the wall. I told myself it had to be one of the neighbors. Maybe sound traveled weird in the building. I turned up the TV and tried to ignore it, but I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I told my landlord, Mr. Kiading. He was in his late 60s, a grumpy guy with a coffee mug always in his hand and no time for nonsense, as he called it. Probably mice, he said, waving me off. Old building like this, they get in anywhere. I'll send someone to check next week. Next week. That wasn't exactly comforting, but I didn't argue. I went to work, came home, and by nighttime the scratching was back. Only this time it wasn't just behind the bed. It moved. I could follow it from the bedroom wall to the living room, slow and on purpose. And once again that breathing followed. I moved to the couch, thinking I'd watch TV until I fell asleep. But at around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of the kitchen faucet dripping. Except it wasn't dripping when I went to bed. And when I got up to check it, the dripping stopped before I even got to the sink. It went on like that for days. Small, unsettling things that seemed random, but all happened when I was alone. My keys, which I always left on the hook by the door, were found on the kitchen counter. One morning, the cabinet where I kept my cereal was open when I got home from work, and twice I swore I smelled cigarette smoke in my apartment, even though I didn't smoke, and the building didn't allow smoking. The real breaking point came about 2 weeks later. I'd been sitting in bed reading when I heard it again, the slow scratch behind my headboard. This time, I pressed my ear to the wall, determined to figure out exactly where it was coming from. That's when I heard it. A man's voice, low and muffled, whispering something I couldn't quite understand. I jerked back like I'd been shocked, heart pounding. My first thought was to grab my phone and call someone. But who? The police. And say what? That I heard whispering in my wall. They'd think I was losing it. I sat there for maybe a full minute before curiosity got the better of me. I leaned in again, trying hard to hear. The whisper was clearer this time. It was my name. That was it for me. I grabbed my coat, wallet, and keys, and I was out the door in less than 30 seconds. I didn't stop walking until I was 3 blocks away, standing under the buzzing street light outside a 24-hour diner. My hands were shaking so badly that when I tried to text my friend Hannah to see if I could stay at her place, I had to retype the message 3 times. I stayed with her that night and told her everything the next morning. She tried to make it seem less scary. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone in the apartment next to you has the same name as you. But I could see the worry in her face. She told me I should call the cops just in case. So I did. An officer came out, walked through the apartment, checked the locks, and told me everything looked fine. He said if I heard anything again, I should call right away. I wanted to believe that was the end of it. It wasn't. The next night, I triple-checked all the locks and even put a chair under the front door handle before going to bed. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the unmistakable sound of someone walking in my living room. Slow, heavy steps across the creaky wood floor. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. The footsteps stopped, then kept going, heading toward the bedroom. I slid out of bed as quietly as I could and grabbed the baseball bat I kept in the corner. My heart was slamming in my ears. The footsteps stopped just outside my bedroom door. I held the bat so hard my knuckles hurt. Then nothing. No footsteps. No sound. Just silence. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen. When I finally worked up the courage to pull open the door, the living room was empty. Everything looked exactly the same as when I went to bed. The police came again the next day, but with no sign of someone breaking in and nothing stolen. There wasn't much they could do. By now, I was sleeping less than 3 hours a night, jumping at every sound. I started leaving my TV on all night just to cover up the creaks and whispers. But 2 nights later, I learned the TV didn't help. I woke up to the faint sound of static. Not from the TV in my bedroom, but from the living room. When I went to check, I froze in the hallway. The TV was on, but the volume was turned all the way down. And sitting in the middle of the coffee table was my phone. Except I had left it charging on my nightstand. On the phone screen was a photo, a new one. It was me sleeping. I ran. I didn't care what time it was. I ran straight to my car and drove to Hannah's. When I told her what happened, she told me I had to stay at her place until I figured things out. The next morning, we went back together so I could grab some things I needed. Everything seemed normal at first until I opened the door to my bedroom closet. In the far back corner, hidden behind a row of hanging clothes, was a small square hole cut in the wall. I pulled the clothes aside and stared. The hole led into a dark, narrow crawl space. And on the floor of that space was a thin mattress, a blanket, several empty water bottles, and a half-eaten sandwich wrapped in foil. Someone had been living in my walls. We called the police immediately. They searched the crawl space and found a small backpack with clothes, a lighter, and a pack of cigarettes, the same smell I'd noticed before. But the person who'd been living there was gone. The police said they'd have more patrols in the area and told me to stay somewhere else for a while. I didn't argue. A week later, I went back to get the rest of my things. The landlord had put a padlock on the crawl space, but the apartment still felt wrong. I was in the bedroom packing up when I noticed something on the wall above the headboard. Faint scratches like letters carved into the paint. I stepped closer and my stomach dropped. It was my name, over and over, scratched into the wall. I moved out that day. To this day, they never found the guy. Sometimes when I'm lying in bed in my new place, I swear I hear it again. That slow, dragging scratch inside the wall. And I can't help but wonder if he's still out there looking for another wall to hide behind. It was close to midnight when I finally decided to stop for the day. I'd been on the road since 8 a.m. trying to push through the Kansas part of my cross-country drive. There's something about Kansas at night that feels wrong. Not in a supernatural way, just in a too empty way. The roads seem endless. The towns are far apart. And the silence doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like you've been forgotten by the world. I was exhausted. My back hurt. And the caffeine I'd been drinking since early afternoon had worn off into a dull headache. So when I saw the dim neon sign for Highway Rest Inn, I didn't think twice. The place was small, maybe a dozen rooms total, the kind of roadside motel where the parking lot is basically the front yard. One buzzing street light lit up the cracked pavement, and the front office was a tiny glass booth with an old man inside, half watching a small TV on the counter. I parked right in front of the office, stepped out into the warm, humid air, and grabbed my wallet. Inside, the old man looked up from his TV. His face was saggy, not just from age, but from the kind of tiredness that makes you think he's been here for decades. "Just you?" he asked, voice raspy. "Yeah, just passing through," I said, sliding my ID across the counter. He nodded slowly, then shuffled through a set of worn key tags hanging on hooks. He picked one, paused, then put it back. Finally, he picked a brass key with a faded number 5 painted on it. "Room 5, he said, sliding it toward me. As I took it, I noticed the key for room 6 wasn't hanging with the others. The hook was there, labeled in peeling black letters, but it was empty. "Are you full tonight?" I asked casually, just making conversation. He didn't look up from the paper he was writing something on. "Nah, just keeping some rooms closed for repairs." The way he said it was short, almost like he wanted me to stop asking. I nodded and went back outside. Room 5 was right next to room 6. As I walked down the row, I saw room 6's door was chained shut from the outside, not just locked. There was an actual heavy chain wound through the handle and bolted into the frame. A rusted padlock kept it closed. The blinds inside the window were pulled tight, but the way the curtain bulged a little at the bottom made me wonder if something was pressed against it. I shook it off. It's not like I'd never seen weird motel stuff before. Sometimes rooms are shut down for bug control or because of some plumbing problem. I let myself into room 5. The place was what you'd expect for $40 a night. Musty carpet, 2 lamps that didn't match, a bedspread with weird patterns that were probably supposed to hide stains. I tossed my bag on the bed and sat down, rubbing my eyes. All I wanted was a shower and sleep. The shower was warm but not hot, but it did the job. I climbed into bed, flipped through TV channels for maybe 5 minutes before giving up and turning it off. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound as I started to fall asleep. I woke up to a noise I couldn't figure out. It was faint at first, almost like the AC unit was struggling. But then I realized it was coming from the wall. The wall I shared with room 6. It was a muffled sound, like someone speaking quietly, too quiet for me to understand the words. I sat there in the dark, trying to decide if it was the TV in the next room. But it was past 1 a.m., and I remembered that room 6 wasn't supposed to be in use. The murmuring stopped. I lay back down. Maybe 10 minutes later, there was a different sound. Something dragging, a dull scrape, slow and steady like furniture being pulled across the floor. Then a sharp knock. Not on my door, on the shared wall. I froze. Came again. 2 quick knocks, then silence. My skin prickled. I tried to tell myself maybe the owner had someone working in there late, fixing whatever problem he'd mentioned. But at 1:20 in the morning, that didn't make sense. I stayed awake for another hour, but nothing else happened. Eventually, I drifted back to sleep. The second night was when things got worse. I decided to stay an extra day because a bad thunderstorm was coming in and I didn't want to risk driving through it. The storm hit hard that night, rain pounding the windows and wind howling through the gaps in the door frame. Around midnight, I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard it again. The dragging sound. This time it was followed by a thud. Then I heard something else. A whisper. I sat up, trying hard to hear over the storm. The whisper was faint, but I swear it was coming from the vent. I slid off the bed, got down on the floor near the wall, and pressed my ear to the vent cover. "Help me!" The voice was weak, shaking. My blood went cold. I whispered back, "Hello? Who's in there?" There was silence for a long time. Then, "Don't tell him." I jerked back, staring at the vent like it might answer me. The storm rattled the windows again, and I told myself I had to be imagining it. But before I could convince myself, there was a different sound from room 6. Heavy footsteps. They stopped right against the wall we shared. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I went to the owner. I told him I'd heard noises in the empty room, even voices. His face didn't change much, but his eyes did this weird darting thing like he was trying to figure out what to say. "Probably the storm making the pipes rattle," he said finally. "Don't worry about it." I asked if he could open the room and check. "No," he said flatly. That was it. I went back to my room and thought about just packing up and leaving. But a stubborn part of me needed to know. So that night, I waited until the office light went out and the parking lot was quiet. Then I stepped outside, rain jacket over my pajamas, and walked to room 6. The padlock was still there. The chain looked old but strong. I got down on my knees, trying to look through the small gap in the curtain. Something moved inside. I stumbled back, heart pounding. The movement was small, like someone shifting on the floor. I was still staring when I heard the softest sound behind me. A footstep on wet pavement. I turned. The owner was standing there, rain dripping from the edge of his hat, eyes locked on me. "You shouldn't be out here," he said quietly. Before I could answer, there was a loud bang from inside room 6. Something slammed into the wall hard enough to shake the chain. The owner didn't flinch. He just stepped forward, putting himself between me and the door. "Go to your room," he said, and there was nothing tired or worn in his voice. Now, it was sharp, commanding. I went. I don't know why I didn't argue, why I didn't run to my car right then. But something in his face told me it wouldn't be smart. I left first thing in the morning. 2 days later, while stopped at a diner in Missouri, I saw a local news story playing on the TV above the counter. It was about the Highway Rest Inn. Police had raided the place after a missing woman was spotted there by someone passing by. She'd been chained inside room 6 for weeks. They showed a blurry picture of her being taken out on a stretcher. The owner was arrested for kidnapping, keeping someone prisoner, and assault. When the waitress brought my coffee, she noticed I was staring at the TV. "You hear about that place before?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said. "I stayed in room 5. I live in a quiet suburb in Indiana. The kind of place where people leave their front doors unlocked and neighbors bring over extra zucchini from their gardens in the summer. My daughter Olivia is 8 years old. She's got this wild curly hair that won't stay down and a laugh so loud it can cut through any bad day. I've been a single dad since she was 4. Her mom moved to another state for work and we keep things civil, but Olivia's with me all the time. Most mornings I drop her off at school before heading to work. It's a routine we've gotten really good at. Coffee for me, chocolate milk for her, and a silly game where she tries to guess the color of the first car we'll see on the drive. That's why it stood out to me that morning in late October when she guessed white before we'd even turned the corner. Because sure enough, parked across the street from the school playground, there was a white van. No windows on the sides, just 2 in the back, and the paint looked old, dirty, like it had been sitting for years in some forgotten parking lot. At first, I didn't think much of it. It's a free country. People can park where they want. and maybe it belonged to someone doing work nearby. But when I picked her up that afternoon, the van was still there in the exact same spot. The next morning, same van, same spot. And the morning after that. By day 4, it wasn't just me noticing. A few other parents in the drop-off line were talking about it. One mom even said she saw a man sitting in the driver's seat with the engine running. But when she walked by, he tilted his head down like he was reading something. I started looking at the van every morning, trying to get a good look at the license plates or the driver. But the angle and the glare off the windshield made it hard. Olivia didn't seem to notice, thank God. The last thing I wanted was to make her scared. That Friday, I decided to go by the school at lunch just to see if the van was still there outside normal drop-off and pickup times. Sure enough, there it was, now parked a little further down the street, but still facing the playground. That's when my stomach started to twist. I called the non-emergency police number and explained what was happening. The person on the phone said they'd send a car to check it out. By the time I picked Olivia up that day, the van was gone. I figured maybe that was the end of it. It wasn't. The following Monday morning, the van was back, this time closer than before. I could see a shape in the driver's seat, head tilted slightly toward the playground. I tried to catch his eyes as I drove past, but he turned his head toward the dashboard. That night after Olivia went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop looking up things like white van near school and stranger danger reports Indiana. Nothing matched. No alerts, no news stories. It was like I was the only one taking it seriously. I told myself I'd keep my distance but keep watching. 2 days later, I woke up at 2:30 in the morning to use the bathroom. On the way back to my room, I walked past the front window and happened to look outside. Parked across the street from my house was the same van. I froze, just standing there in the dark, staring at it. It wasn't running, no lights on, but I could see the outline of a man in the driver's seat. I didn't move, didn't even blink. After what felt like minutes, the van slowly pulled away. Not speeding, just drifting down the street and disappearing into the night. The next morning, I kept Olivia home from school and called the police again. An officer came by, took my story, and said they'd patrol the area more often. They also told me to take pictures if I saw him again. For a week, nothing happened. No van, no sign of him. Then one evening, I got home from work to find an envelope taped to my front door. Inside was a single photo of Olivia taken from behind as she played on the swings at recess. I felt like I was going to throw up. I called the police right away, but there were no fingerprints, nothing to help except the photo itself. They told me to stay alert and keep my doors locked. The following days were a blur of being on edge all the time. Every time a car slowed near our street, I'd get tense. I stopped letting Olivia play outside unless I was right there with her. One night around 11:45, I was in bed when I heard a faint tapping sound. At first, I thought it was a tree branch against the house. But when it came again, steady and on purpose, I got up and walked quietly to the living room window. The white van was in my driveway. Before I could react, the tapping stopped. Now I heard footsteps. Heavy, slow, moving toward the front door. My phone was in my bedroom, but I didn't dare run back for it. I didn't want to make noise. A shadow passed by the frosted glass window beside the door. Whoever it was stopped, standing just inches away from me on the other side. Then, in the most casual, normal tone, a man's voice said, "She looks just like her mother." I backed away so fast I almost tripped over the coffee table. The footsteps went back. The van's engine started. By the time I ran to grab my phone and call 911, it was gone. Police came within minutes, but again found nothing. They promised to keep an unmarked car near the house at night. 2 days later, Olivia was at a friend's birthday party across town. I was enjoying the rare quiet when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo. Olivia in her friend's backyard eating cake. No words with it. I called the party host right away. She said everything was fine. Olivia was right there laughing with the other kids. But when I asked if she'd noticed anyone strange nearby, her voice got quiet. Actually, there's this white van that's been parked down the street since we started. I didn't wait. I told her I was on my way and to keep Olivia inside. By the time I got there, the van was gone. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark living room with the baseball bat across my lap, staring at the front window. Around 3 a.m., I must have fallen asleep because the sound of my phone buzzing woke me up. It was another text from the same unknown number. This one was a video. It was me asleep in the chair, mouth a little open, baseball bat across my lap. The camera was so close I could see my chest moving up and down. My stomach dropped as I realized what that meant. He'd been inside the house. I called the police, but when they arrived, there was no sign that someone broke in. Every door was locked. Every window shut. They couldn't explain it. I changed every lock in the house the next day and had security cameras put in. It's been 3 weeks since the last time I saw him, but every time I hear a van engine in the distance, my heart starts pounding. I walk Olivia into school every morning now, and I don't leave until I see her teacher take her inside. The cameras have never caught him, but sometimes at night, I wake up with the feeling that someone's watching me from the dark. And I know deep down the game isn't over. Music. I've always liked looking around thrift stores and estate sales. There's something about digging through the forgotten leftovers of other people's lives that's always interested me. I never bought anything too strange. Mostly old books, records, maybe a small decoration or two. But one Thursday evening, I stopped by a small, dimly lit shop in the older part of town. The kind of place squeezed between two boarded-up buildings with a flickering neon open sign in the window. The bell above the door gave a weak jingle as I stepped inside. The smell of dust and something faintly metallic hung in the air. The place felt tight, aisles too narrow, shelves packed high with objects whose stories you couldn't guess at. In the far corner, half hidden behind a stack of broken lamps, I saw a beat-up cardboard box with a handwritten sign taped to the front. $1 each old VHS tapes. Something about it pulled me in. The tapes were unmarked, just black plastic cases with faded peeling labels. I picked one up and turned it over, expecting to see some movie title written in marker. But instead, there was only a number, 147, written in neat block letters. Every tape in the box had a similar number. No titles, no descriptions. I bought 3 of them without really thinking. The man behind the counter, a thin figure with skin the color of old paper, didn't make small talk. He just slid the tapes into a plastic bag. His long fingers brushed mine for a second too long before he said quietly how much I owed. His eyes stayed on me as I left, and I swear he kept staring through the shop's dirty front window until I turned the corner. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I dug out my old VCR, plugged it into the TV, and slid in the first tape. For a moment, static hissed across the screen. Then it cleared to show a dimly lit basement. The camera was set up in the corner, not moving. There was a single wooden chair in the center of the room. After a minute or two of silence, a man walked into the picture. Tall, wide shoulders, wearing a dark hoodie with the hood pulled low over his face. He stood behind the chair like he was waiting for someone. Eventually, another man was led into the shot, hands tied, mouth covered. His eyes were wide and moving around like a trapped animal. The hooded figure placed a hand on the back of the chair, looked directly into the camera, and said, Lot number 147. Starting bid at 5,000. Took me a few seconds to understand what I was hearing. The voice was calm, almost casual, but the words sank into me like ice water. The hooded man stepped aside, and I realized the camera wasn't just recording. It was broadcasting. I could faintly hear voices through the static, muffled but clear, calling out numbers one after another. The tied-up man was shaking hard, trying to shout through the covering on his mouth. The rest of the tape was a blur of panic and disbelief for me. The bidding went on for what felt like forever, ending with the hooded figure saying a final number and the words, "Sold." The screen cut to black. I just sat there on the couch, my skin crawling. My first thought was that it had to be fake. Some messed up student film maybe, but deep down I knew it wasn't. Something about the realness, the fear in that man's eyes was too real to be acting. I should have stopped there, but of course I didn't. The second tape was numbered 148. Same basement, same hooded figure. This time it was a woman, maybe in her mid-20s, tied to the chair. Her makeup was streaked down her face. Her lips looked split like she'd been hit. The bidding was quicker this time. At one point, she looked straight at the camera and whispered something I couldn't hear. And then, for just a moment, her eyes seemed to shift, like she was looking past the camera, right at me. I turned off the TV and just sat in the dark. Every shadow in the room suddenly felt closer. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I'd throw the tapes out in the morning. But sleep didn't come easily that night. I kept thinking about that last look from the woman. The next day, when I woke up, there was a fourth tape sitting on top of my VCR. I hadn't bought a fourth tape. The number written on the label was 149. I didn't even touch it at first. My apartment door had been locked. No signs that someone broke in, but someone had been inside. My skin felt hot and prickly as I finally picked up the tape. This time, when the static cleared, my breath caught in my throat. It was my apartment. The same couch I was sitting on now, the same coffee mug still sitting on the table, and me sleeping curled under a blanket. A voice, low and amused, spoke from behind the camera. Lot number 149. Opening bids. Start now. I ripped the tape out, heart hammering, and ran straight to the police. I told them everything. The shop, the tapes, the man behind the counter, the new tape. They took the tapes but didn't seem convinced. They said they'd look into it and told me to stay somewhere else for a while. I stayed at my friend Mike's place for a week, trying to pretend life was normal. But then Mike handed me a package one morning saying it had been left at his door with my name on it. Inside was another tape. No number this time, just the word finale written in red ink. I didn't want to watch it, but I had to know. Mike and I put it in the VCR together. The screen lit up to show the basement again, but this time there were multiple chairs all filled, and in one of them was me, tied up, mouth covered, eyes wide with terror. Mike yanked the tape out before it could play any further. Both of us were shaking. He called the cops again, and this time they took it more seriously. They went to the shop I told them about, but it was gone, completely empty, as if it had never been there. I moved to a new apartment across the city, changed my number, stopped going to thrift stores for months. Nothing happened until last week when I came home. There was a single VHS tape on my doorstep. No number, no words, just a strip of tape with today's date written on it. And I know if I watch it, it'll be my last night alive. Music. I met Logan James when we were 8 years old. We lived 2 houses apart in a quiet neighborhood circle in Maplewood, Oregon. From the first day we talked, we were best friends. We played Little League together, built forts in the woods behind my house, and even got kicked out of middle school together for one day after we accidentally set off the fire alarm during a science project. Everyone in town knew us as a pair. If you saw me, you saw Logan. If you saw Logan, I was never far away. We were brothers in every way except by blood. I'm 30 now, and for most of my life, I never once doubted that Logan was the kind of friend you could call at 3 o'clock in the morning and know he'd be there. But what I learned last year, it ruined every memory, every laugh, every single bit of trust one ever had for him. It wasn't like finding out your friend was cheating in a card game or had lied about something silly in high school. It was darker. It was terrifying. And the worst part is that I should have seen it coming. It started with a phone call in the middle of a rainy March night. My phone buzzed on my nightstand and I sleepily saw Logan's name. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said it might be serious. His voice was shaky, which was weird because Logan never sounded scared. He said his car had broken down about 20 miles outside of town on Highway 47 near those old empty grain silos. He needed me to pick him up. I didn't even think twice. I grabbed my keys and left right away. That was the thing about Logan. I'd have driven through a snowstorm for him. When I pulled up, his truck was parked awkwardly on the gravel shoulder, warning lights flashing. He was leaning against the hood, smoking. Hood pulled up against the rain. I rolled down my window to shout over the storm. "You okay?" He nodded quickly, almost too quickly, and got into my passenger seat. His clothes were wet, and I noticed his hands were shaking. Not from the cold, but like he'd just run 10 miles or been through something bad. I tried to get him to talk, but he brushed everything off, saying he'd explain later and to just drive. He gave me an address. Not his house, but an old property on the edge of town. It was a rundown one-story place I didn't know. No porch light, no signs of anyone living there. The siding was warped from years of weather, and the windows were dark. "Whose place is this?" I asked. "Just someone I know." "Thanks, man. You really saved me tonight," he said, not looking at me. He got out quickly, giving me a quick wave before disappearing inside. I drove off, feeling uneasy. Over the next week, Logan was different. He stopped answering my texts right away. When we did hang out, he seemed distracted, always checking his phone or looking toward windows. Once I caught him watching a house across the street while we were parked in my car eating drive-through food. It wasn't just casually looking at people. He was locked in, focused, like a hunter waiting for movement. I asked if everything was okay, and he just said, "Yeah, man, all good. You worry too much." But I knew something was wrong. I've known him since we were kids. I could tell when he was hiding something. Then came the night I made the mistake of going into his garage. We'd been planning to work on my old dirt bike, and Logan had told me to meet him there. He wasn't home when I got there, so I let myself in through the side door. His garage had always been messy, but this time it looked organized. There were rows of neatly stacked plastic bins along the wall, each labeled with things like tools, camping gear, and miscellaneous. But one bin pushed toward the back had no label. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe instinct. Inside were photographs, hundreds of them. Most were of random people around town, walking to their cars, leaving the grocery store, sitting in their living rooms. Some of the shots were taken through windows, some clearly without the person knowing. I flipped through, my stomach twisting tighter with each one. And then I saw her. It was my sister Claire. She lives 2 towns over and has barely talked to Logan since high school. The photo was of her making coffee in her kitchen, wearing pajamas. The angle was from outside through the glass. My hands shook as I looked deeper into the stack. There were more photos of Claire. In different outfits, different days, even one of her sleeping on the couch. I felt sick. I dropped the stack back into the bin and stepped away trying to make sense of it. That's when I heard Logan's voice from behind me. "What are you doing in here?" His tone wasn't playful. It was cold, careful. I turned, trying to play it off, but he stepped closer, blocking the door. The smile he gave me wasn't the one I grew up with. It was something darker, something that made my chest tighten. "You've been in here for a while," he said, eyes looking at me like he could read every thought in my head. "Find something interesting?" I stammered out some excuse about looking for the socket wrench, but I could tell he didn't believe it. He walked past me, closed the lid on the bin, and locked it with a small padlock from his pocket. The whole time, he never stopped looking at me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every memory I had of Logan played in my head, now twisted by what I'd seen. The way he'd randomly disappear for hours. The times he'd accidentally show up where I was hanging out. The way he always wanted to know where my family was. It all made sense in the worst possible way. I told myself I needed proof before I went to the police. I couldn't just accuse my best friend of being a predator without something solid. So I started following him. For a week, I kept my distance tracking where he went. I saw him park outside houses late at night and just sit there watching, sometimes for hours. The last night I followed him. I wish I hadn't. He drove out past the old grain silos again, this time parking near that same rundown house from before. He got out, opened the trunk, and dragged something out. A large bag that looked way too heavy for just clothes or gear. He hauled it into the house, and even from the road I could swear I saw it move. I called 911 right then. I told them everything. But by the time the police got there, the house was empty. The smell inside was enough to make the officers gag. Metallic like old blood. But there was no one there and no bag. Logan never came back to his own house after that night. His truck was gone, his phone disconnected. The police took my statement, but without solid evidence, it felt like they were just waiting. It's been 8 months now. I haven't heard from him, but sometimes I get this feeling when I'm home alone, like someone's watching from outside. Last week, I found an envelope tucked under my front door. No note, just a single photograph of me sleeping in my bed. The angle was from inside my room. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with every light on, holding a kitchen knife like it could actually stop him if he decided to come in. I kept replaying every second of our friendship, wondering how many times I'd been inches away from the truth without knowing it. How many nights had he been out there standing just beyond my window? At around 3 o'clock in the morning, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some part of me needed to hear it. Still looking for that socket wrench? Logan's voice was calm, almost amused. "You were in my garage for a long time, man. I think you found something else." I didn't answer. My hand was slick with sweat, gripping the phone like it could keep me safe. "I'm not mad," he continued. "Honestly, I'm impressed. You lasted longer than most people do." Click. I called the police immediately, but all they could do was take a report and tell me to stay somewhere safe, as if there was such a place anymore. For the next week, I stayed at a friend's apartment on the other side of town. It helped a little until the third night there when we came home from grabbing food and found the door unlocked. My friend swore he'd locked it. Nothing was missing, but I noticed something on the coffee table that hadn't been there before. A small silver socket wrench. That was when I knew he wasn't just watching me. He was playing with me. I moved into a motel after that. Changed motels twice. Each time I'd check every lock twice before sleeping. But then I started finding little things that didn't belong. A toothpick on the bathroom counter. A folded grocery receipt in the nightstand drawer. A penny placed perfectly in the middle of the pillow. He was letting me know he'd been there, and I couldn't stop it. The breaking point came 2 weeks ago. I was pulling into the motel parking lot when my headlights swept across the far end of the lot. There he was, leaning against a lamppost, hood up, arms crossed, just watching me. I froze. He didn't move. He didn't need to. The message was clear. I could see him, which meant he wanted to be seen. I didn't go inside. I drove until sunrise, stopping only when the tank was almost empty. But when I finally walked into my room the next morning, there was a note under the TV remote, for words written in his handwriting. Lot number 150. Soon. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just personal. The photos, the watching, they were part of something bigger. The same way those numbered tapes worked in that other story I'd heard whispered about. He was marking me. Now every creak in the wall sounds like a footstep. Every shadow outside the window could be him. I've stopped calling the police. All they ever do is show up after he's gone. I've stopped telling friends where I'm staying. The fewer people know, the better. But I can't run forever. I think he's letting me get tired, wearing me down until the night he decides it's time. And when that night comes, I won't see him in the shadows. I'll wake up and he'll be there sitting at the foot of my bed, smiling like he did when we were kids. And then I'll finally understand what lot number 150 really means.